Hello everyone, and welcome back to Boss Economic World. I'm your host, here to peel back the layers of the financial onion, wipe away the tears, and show you the truth behind the numbers. Today is November 21st, 2025. If you're watching this from a comfortable chair, stay there. If you're an investor holding UK government bonds, you might want to pour yourself a stiff drink. Because folks, the melodrama unfolding in London right now isn't just a political soap opera, it's a masterclass in how political panic destroys economic logic. We are 5 days away from what was supposed to be Chancellor Rachel Reeves' crowning moment, the November 26th budget. Instead, we are witnessing a frantic, high-speed reverse maneuver that has left tire marks all over the Treasury's carpets. Today, we are going to dissect the coup plot against Prime Minister Keir Starmer, analyze why Chancellor Reeves just shredded her own playbook, and explain why the bond markets look like a coiled spring ready to snap. We're talking about a £30 billion black hole, a moldy smorgasbord of taxes, and the return of the dreaded Bond Vigilantes. Let's get into it. Let's set the scene. It is late 2025. The Labour government, which swept to power with a landslide in 2024, is currently polling lower than a subterranean basement. The honeymoon isn't just over, the divorce papers are being drafted. News broke this week of a plot to oust Keir Starmer. The wolves are at the door, and while Health Secretary Wes Streeting is denying he's measuring the curtains for number 10, the smell of mutiny is potent. Why does this matter for your wallet? Because political survival always trumps economic efficiency. Chancellor Rachel Reeves was preparing to make a very brave, very unpopular economic decision, raising income tax thresholds or rates to plug a massive fiscal gap. It would have broken a manifesto pledge, yes. But it would have been a big lever, a decisive move to fix the books. But when the Prime Minister's job is on the line, you don't raise income tax. That's political suicide. So, the pair took the extraordinary step of ripping up their plans just days before the deadline. The catalyst? The Office for Budget Responsibility, the fiscal watchdog, whispered some sweet nothings into Reeves' ear. They told her the outlook wasn't quite as catastrophic as feared. This gave her the excuse she needed to shelve the income tax hike. But here is the truth, the math hasn't changed, only the politics have. Reeves still needs to find £30 billion to stop the UK's debt from spiraling. By abandoning the big lever of income tax, she has forced herself into a corner where she must pull 100 small levers. And as any engineer or economist will tell you, complex machines with too many moving parts tend to break. Let's analyze the economic corner Reeves has painted herself into. We call this the Policy Trilemma. Imagine a triangle where you can only pick two sides. 1. The bond markets, they want fiscal discipline. 2. The manifesto, the voters want you to keep your promises. 3. The backbenchers, the left wing of the party wants massive spending to fix living standards. Matthew Lawrence from the Commonwealth think tank put it perfectly, Reeves is trying to thread a needle through this trilemma. Prior to this week's U-turn, Reeves was trying to please the bond markets. She promised ironclad fiscal rules. She courted investors, promising to bring down inflation. The markets believed her. Gilts rallied in early October. But then reality hit. The backbenchers, the MPs who keep Starmer in power, looked at the plan to hike taxes on working people and said, absolutely not. With a leadership challenge looming, Starmer and Reeves blinked. They chose the party over the markets. As Michael Brown from Franklin Templeton noted, the Chancellor and the Prime Minister have put party in front of country, and bond market vigilantes will likely extract a price. What is that price? Higher borrowing costs. As Reeves backtracked on the income tax decision, the markets gave up half of that nice rally. Why? Because investors hate uncertainty. They would rather you tax people and pay your debts than waffle around and maybe pay your debts later. This brings us to the core economic concept of today's episode, efficiency versus distortion. When you need £30 billion, the most efficient way to get it is a broad-based tax like income tax or VAT. It's simple, it raises huge revenue, and the market understands it. When you take that off the table, you are left with what Paul Johnson of the Institute for Fiscal Studies calls a moldy smorgasbord. Reeves now has to scramble to find money in the couch cushions. We are talking about freezing fuel duty, tweaking inheritance tax, closing loopholes. Maybe a windfall tax here, a levy there. The problem with this approach, the small lever approach, is that it creates economic distortion. Every small tax has a specific interest group that gets angry. Every loophole closure has an unintended consequence. Remember George Osborne's 2012 budget? They called it the Omni Shambles. He tried to tax hot Cornish pasties and caravans because he needed cash. The backlash was humiliated, and the revenue raised was negligible. Rupert Harrison, who advised Osborne back then and is now at PIMCO, warned us this week, markets would be concerned if there is a long list of uncertain taxes where revenues are perhaps a bit harder to predict. The market prefers one big, ugly number to 100 small, confusing ones. By pivoting to this smorgasbord strategy to save Starmer's political skin, Reeves is risking a budget that is messy, inefficient, and likely to miss its revenue targets. Let's do the math, because numbers don't lie, even if politicians do. Reeves wants to double her fiscal headroom, the buffer zone for emergencies, to £20 billion. That sounds prudent. But to get there, she needs £30 billion in total consolidation. That is 1% of the entire UK GDP. Where does she find it? The starting point, she had £9.9 billion to spare in March. The loss, she gave away 2/3 of that to stop a rebellion over welfare cuts. The productivity hit, the OBR admitted they were too optimistic before. They've slashed productivity forecasts by 0.3 percentage points. That erases billions in projected revenue. The interest bill, borrowing costs are higher than expected. So, she starts at effectively zero. She needs £30 billion. If she unfreezes fuel duty? That's political poison. If she scraps the two-child benefit cap? That costs her £3.5 billion. If she cuts VAT on energy bills? That costs another £2.5 billion. She is trying to fill a bathtub while the plug is pulled out. And here is the kicker: austerity hurts growth. Capital Economics predicts this fiscal squeeze will lower economic output by 0.2%. The UK economy is currently growing at a tepid 1.3%. If you shave 0.2% off that, you are flirting with stagnation. And if you don't have growth, you can't pay off the debt in the long run. It is a vicious cycle. Now, some of you might be saying, "Boss, this is just a British problem." Wrong. Investors are currently hypersensitive to fiscal incompetence globally. France, their parliament is fragmented, struggling to agree on a budget. Their bond spread is widening. Japan, stocks and bonds are falling because of confusion over stimulus. USA, even treasuries, the safest asset in the world, are being questioned as US debt balloons. Mark Coombs, the billionaire CEO of Ashmore Group, said it clearly in Singapore yesterday: once confidence is gone, you have a real problem, you do get a market shock. He wasn't just talking about emerging markets. He was talking about the G7. The UK is particularly vulnerable because we are repeat offenders. Remember Liz Truss in 2022? Her unfunded tax cuts nearly blew up the pension funds. The UK currently pays a moron premium on its debt, higher interest rates, because investors don't fully trust us yet. Starmer and Reeves were supposed to be the adults in the room. They were supposed to bring back boring competence. But the events of this week, the coup rumors, the policy U-turn, the panic, are screaming instability. If international investors decide the UK is rudderless, they will stop buying gilts. If they stop buying gilts, yields spike. If yields spike, mortgage rates go up. And if mortgage rates go up, the British public, already angry, will become revolutionary. Let's look at the timeline of sentiment. July 2024, Labour wins big. Stability is back. Investors cheer. The Blairism wealth-friendly vibe is strong. October 2024, Reeves' first budget. A £26 billion payroll levy on employers. Business screams. The Bank of England says it stoked inflation. Investment turns off. November 2025, Labour is polling at historic lows. The manifesto is in tatters. The growth mission is stalling. The narrative has shifted from hope and change to tax and survive. Reeves told the CBI a year ago she was not coming back with more borrowing or more taxes. Next Wednesday, she will break that word. She may technically avoid breaking the letter of the manifesto by avoiding income tax hikes, but she is breaking the spirit of her promise to be a low-tax, pro-growth chancellor. Steve Williams from Amuva Asset Management put it bluntly: the whole political economy is on shaky ground here. When the political ground shakes, the economic foundations crack. So, what happens next Wednesday, November 26th? Rachel Reeves faces the biggest test of her career. She has to stand up in Parliament, facing a hostile opposition and a mutinous backbench, and deliver a budget that satisfies the bond markets without getting her Prime Minister fired. She is hoping that by shelving the income tax hike, she buys Starmer some time. But the bond market doesn't care about Starmer's job security. It cares about the deficit. If she relies too heavily on gimmick taxes and ignores the structural deficit, the Bond Vigilantes will return. We could see a spike in yields that forces the Bank of England to keep interest rates high, crushing the very growth Labour promised to deliver. The bottom line: the UK is trapped in a low-growth, high-debt cycle, exacerbated by a political system that punishes hard choices. The good news: government borrowing costs are still 20 basis points below recent highs. The market is nervous, but hasn't panicked yet. Mahmood Pradhan from Amundi says markets are super optimistic she will deliver. The bad news: that optimism is fragile. If Wednesday's budget is seen as a fudge, a desperate attempt to survive a political coup rather than a serious economic plan, that optimism will evaporate faster than rain on a London pavement. Reeves can take comfort in history. George Osborne was booed at the 2012 Olympics after his disaster budget. 3 years later, his party won the election. But Reeves was booed last Tuesday at a business awards dinner. She's getting the boos before the budget has even dropped. My prediction? Next week will be messy. We will see a patchwork of tax hikes that annoy everyone and please no one. The market will likely wobble, demanding higher yields for UK debt. Starmer will survive the immediate coup attempt, but his economic credibility and that of his chancellor has taken a permanent hit. In economics, as in life, you cannot have your cake and eat it too. You certainly can't eat it if you've already promised the cake to the bond markets, the voters, and your angry backbenchers all at the same time. Keep your eyes on the gilt yields next Wednesday, folks. That is where the truth lies. I'm the boss. This is the economic world. See you in the next crisis.